All right, we are live, my friend. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thank you. Just a bit shocked that I've got very used to Zoom's setting that says "improve my appearance?" question mark. I was like, yes, yes, please. And guess what? They don't seem to have that option on StreamYard, so I can see all my imperfections and flaws. And
Oh man,
but we're real, right? We're not some kind of overly airbrushed kinds of guys. We
this
put
is
it
not
out there.
TV. No,
No,
not
this is not
TV.
TV, but not only that, we're not trying to be sort of over slick. I think we're trying to be real, help people with real information. I guess that's
No
how I'm
doubt.
telling myself. How's life in Seattle these days?
It's wonderful. This is literally the best place on the planet. No
Wow.
COVID here at all, and things are beautiful. It's sunny every day,
Right.
and
So sorry, what
yeah.
was that about being real and authentic? Talking about being authentic, I'm just going to share with all people watching that my mug here that my wife just handed me a cup of tea with the word "shut up" on it, because
Oh,
I made a pair of mugs for us a while ago, just in case we sort of playfully get out of an argument. One of which is "shut up" on one side, and the concomitant one is "no, you shut up," which I find a beautiful. It broke the ice. It was our way of getting over the argument, and it worked very well. She found it very funny.
that
So
is a fantastic product idea. Well, let's get
yeah,
into it today. So, just in case for those of you who are jumping on live with us, we are doing our podcast recording session today live, and so we will chit chat for a moment or two to let people jump in. We've announced it a little bit to people ahead of time, not much, but a little bit, and it's early in the morning,
yeah,
my time,
yes,
and afternoon your time. So let's continue to just chat for a moment, and then we'll start the podcast officially and get into it. But today's topic is all about e-commerce breakthroughs for ordinary people, and my new book that's come out, E-commerce Power,
yeah.
and really excited about it. So that's topic for the day. Yeah.
Amazing. Yes. Now I'm looking forward to discussing that as well. I mean, we've only been in the podcast for a few months, but it feels like quite frequently you're like, oh, I've got a new book coming out. So you're obviously, having a prolific year. So we'll have to talk about that. Maybe may or may not get to that today, because I think today we're going to focus on the e-commerce sort of lessons.
Yeah.
But certainly you're a very prolific writer, and it's fantastic to formalize your thoughts. And what's interesting about interviewing you years ago for the podcast and now speaking to each other more regularly is that there's something about the fact you've been through a book writing process that means you've had to really think about and formulate your thoughts. Maybe it's just that, or you're naturally a thoughtful person, but it feels like when you come, you got ideas that are very sort of fully baked and thought through, more than a lot of the podcast guests I've had in the past who are very sort of tactical focused.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that. No, I guess so. Yeah, I guess I'm a long-term thinker. I think that can be a detriment sometimes, but I love to write, basically.
Yeah,
Love to write.
but there is something about writing that changes.
Yeah,
I guess is a thorough process, and you end up with
yeah.
a thorough review of a subject area,
I
right?
hope
Which I
so.
think is pretty good. Fingers crossed. Yeah.
Well, let's jump into it today. You ready to do
Yeah,
the podcast?
let's do that thing. Absolutely. I just
But
want to point out,
yeah,
perhaps
go ahead.
worth pointing out for the people listening live, that whatever you hear today, we are aiming to create this podcast to come out with Jase's book, which is coming out in early January. Is it January the 5th, the launch date?
Yeah.
So therefore, any links we mention today may not be live. This isn't some kind of cunning marketing ploy. What we should do, of course, put a lead capture form on those pages for anyone who's listening on Facebook for the next while. So I'll leave that with you, the joys of GoDaddy plus email capture, whatever you use for that. But just to let you know, the book is not available yet. If you're listening live. So if we say that it is in the podcast, we're not lying to you. We're just preparing for about a month's hence.
Thank you. Good point. And the other point I would just make is if you're watching live with us, feel free to ask questions. We are broadcasting this to our YouTube channels and then also to our Facebook pages and to our Facebook groups. And we'd love to answer questions and have this be a dialogue. Happy to do that. So just feel free to ask questions. We're using StreamYard as our tool. And but we can see all the questions pop in and answer them on any platform. So feel free to do that. And we'll go from there.
Yeah. Excellent. Yes, I can see a few people are coming in to join us as we speak. So, yeah, let's get into this then. So, we've got quite a lot to go through. So, are we good to rock and roll? Are we going to do the actual formal of the podcast?
Do this.
Right then. Here we go. So, Jason, your newest book, E-commerce Power: How the Little Guys Are Building Brands and Beating the Giants at E-commerce, is coming out right now. and it's the perfect time to discuss it. And of course, to get some behind the scenes details and why you wrote it. And also want to find out about the process and how your marketing launch is going to come together. But first of all, we're going to dive into the e-commerce lessons, I think, today. So tell us about the book.
Yeah, I'm really excited about it. It's a long time coming. My prior books have been about social media and more tactical, marketing efforts. And this book is really the culmination of our coaching system and approach that we use with our e-commerce coaching clients. And we've worked for the last 3 years. Kyle, my business partner, and I have worked with coaching clients, and we've really used a systematic approach to helping them. And we didn't have it in a public-facing format anywhere. And so this book is really the encapsulation of those strategies and the process by which we help people scale up their e-commerce work. And it really has led to incredible breakthroughs. We were literally just Friday mornings coaching calls, had one person say that they're ending this year triple over last year's revenue. We have other coaching clients that have just absolutely crushed it and are on just tremendous growth paces. And it's exciting. And so this framework is something we're very, very comfortable with using with people individually to see growth in their business. And I'm really excited to get it out in the form of a book to help a lot of people who are interested in the idea of e-commerce, but maybe don't know where to start.
Excellent. So it's really an encapsulation of the last 3 years' work, which is a fantastically valuable thing to have. It's a lot more valuable than just some ideas that you put together, right? It's been tested through reality, which is always great to hear. So I guess let's start at the beginning. So you've already hinted at some of the reasons why what this book is. It's an encapsulation of your work with Kyle, your wonderful business partner, who I've worked with before as one of your clients, of course. Great guy, very successful Amazon seller in his own right, of course.
Yeah.
So you've hinted at a little bit about who it's for, but just, tell me why you wrote it and who it's for, I guess, are the main questions.
Yeah, sure. Well, when I was working on this book, I was starting to reflect more and more on my own e-commerce journey. We've been at this game for 12 years now. Really started in 2007, 2008. So we're getting to be old school e-commerce sellers. We started on Shopify in 2013 before many people had heard of Shopify. And but the part of the story that a lot of people don't know is I really wanted to get into e-commerce in 1998, and I heard, the story is that I needed money, and I was trying to figure out a side hustle, and I met a guy who was making $1,000 a day on the internet, and back then it was just so early, and people still had. Email was a killer app back then that most people hadn't even gotten into yet. And he was making $1,000 a day on a website that he had made for Traffic School. It was basically an online traffic school. He's one of the first makers of that type of online tool. And it was approved by the county courthouses. And his business was scaling really fast. And I talked to him, and he just needed some help 2-3 hours a week with data entry. But I felt like I needed more help than that, more work than that, more hours. So instead I got a job at Kinko's, which is, I don't know if you know what Kinko's is, but it was a copy shop making copies for people. And I worked in the evenings and weekends there making copies for people. But as I look back on it, I think, man, if I would have done those 2 or 3 hours a week for that guy, my life would be different. 10 years went by after meeting him, and I just couldn't figure out how to sell online. I wanted to sell online so badly, but I just couldn't figure it out. And there weren't the tools and training out there to really help. Until finally Dave Espino's eBay Auctions for Profit course came out, and I got that and started to learn about it. But it took me 10 years, and I really feel for people in that situation. I mean, literally just last week, I had somebody reach out to me who said, "Hey, I'm trying to figure out a job transition. Is e-commerce an opportunity? What do you think of these other opportunities?" And I had a good chat with him, and he actually gave him a PDF copy of this book because there are a lot of people who are in this situation. And I just really want to shorten that time to implementation. Man, if it takes anybody 10 years to get up and going with e-commerce work like it took me 10 years, I'll feel bad. And really, I mean, and sincerely, that it was just a decade of wanting to do something that I didn't know how to do. And that was really the driver behind putting this book together. And it's really who the ideal customer is people who are early into it or trying to figure out how to get into it. And it's really a systematic approach for them to jump in and figure out how to sell online.
Interesting. So yeah, first of all, I can relate to, probably in my case, I took 15 years before I started an online business, having wanted to do it. And to be fair to myself, I suppose I did spend about 5 of those years in some kind of training, without actually kind of pulling the trigger really strongly or in a meaningful way. But I guess you've put your finger on a couple of things really, that you struggled with, and I'd be interested to know why you think it took so long. But a couple of things you said. One is it sounded like you didn't know what to do. And then I guess there are other barriers as well. So why do you think it took you so long, and why do you think other people struggle with getting started?
Yeah, I think there's two fundamental things e-commerce work hinges on. One is a product, and the other is a platform. And so I was confused about both. I didn't know how to do either, and I didn't have a product strategy. And I kept, as I reflect back on my journey, I kept overcomplicating it. I kept over trying to create. I was trying to create like a new product no one ever heard of before, and it's just not the way to do it. And I didn't realize that at the time, but I kept thinking I had to come up with a novelty, and the novelty would give me permission to sell online. And that was just an error of thinking. And I was in that rut for years, and it just wasn't the way to do it. And in hindsight now, looking back, it's obvious that it was a clear mental mistake. And so the product is a barrier. It's a big part of trying to sort out how to get online and do something. And then the platforms, but the platforms have really gotten so much easier. I mean, for goodness sakes, now you can sell on Facebook, which people are probably watching this on, and tons of apps like OfferUp, Craigslist, and then of course bigger marketplaces, Amazon, eBay, Walmart.com. Shopify is the one I coach people on and show them how to set up sites for. There's just the platform revolution has occurred, and so there's really just one challenge left, and that's a product strategy. And that whole area of understanding really still is a huge roadblock for people. Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess what you're saying is, you tried to make a product that was extremely unique,
Yeah.
as opposed to somewhat or unique enough, I suppose.
Yeah.
You tried to make a perfect product rather than a minimal viable product. It reminds me of a lesson I had from a composing teacher years ago, composing, actually writing music at university, and I got really blocked about something. And to be fair, he was an intimidating kind of character. Like some people who find things kind of easy themselves aren't very good coaches, I have to say. And he said, "Look, you're trying to write a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
Just write a training piece if you like." And that was really good advice, actually. Yeah, that's because I guess it's very easy to do that, isn't it? I encounter that all the time, that people want to create a perfect business in one go.
Yeah.
We talked about that in previous episodes, right? About the fact that things need to be iterative and actually accepting that your first go isn't that great. So, but that's interesting. And tell me a bit more about that. Go on.
I was going to say, let me just follow up on that, because at first blush, that sounds like a good, plausible way to go forward. Create something interesting and sell it. But the problem with doing that is you're trying to test 2 or 3 concepts, and you don't know which ones are failing. So, for example, if you try to come up with a new product and sell it online, you're trying, as your first go, you're testing whether you can sell online, which may not be, you might fail at that level, but you're also testing the product and whether people are interested in that product at all. And so you're adding layers of complexity to your experiment. And that experiment can fail then in so many different ways. You won't know why it didn't work. You'll just realize you're stuck. And so having a path that just gets you in the game is really, I think, vital. And so, I just was listening to the Tony Hsieh interview on how I built this, and sadly he's passed away. But the interview was about how he started Zappos with another person who actually founded Zappos, and he came along as the investor and technologist. And they literally took photos of shoes in a shoe store, and the guy lived like right next door to the shoe store, upstairs in an apartment. He would go and put those shoes on his website, and list them and even sell them. And then when they would be purchased, he would go down, buy the shoes from the store and send it to the customer. Now, he was losing money on every shoe sale, but in a way, it's kind of genius because it was giving him clear insight into whether shoes could be purchased online and sold that way and what people were interested in. And they literally just did that for a good amount of time until they learned how to sell shoes online. And then the rest is history. Zappos was $1 billion acquisition for Amazon, 5-10 years ago. And but that's how they started. And when you think about it, those are the kinds of things that I would encourage people to do is don't get hung up on the product creation component as much as just figuring out what do people want that is not available that I know how to make or source or get online, and go through those initial learning points. And it's something that's not scalable, maybe like the Zappos shoe example. You could look back at that and say, well, that would never be a good business. And you're right, it would never be a good business. But it's completely not scalable. But what it did was give them this concept of having a track to run on that they could then optimize, perfect, learn, and explore, and really learn how to build an e-commerce business successfully. And they were doing that back in, I think, 98 to 2000 or 2001, something in that range. And so, 20 years later, it's a massive operation that's been hugely successful. And so that's just one example of the kind of thinking that I really encourage people to go with, and to avoid the mental mistake of trying to come up with some spectacular new thing that no one's heard of or seen before. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what that implies then, I mean, thank you, really beautifully put. And the fact that you're trying to, really validate several different concepts at the same time is a really critical point. I love that. So what do we need to do then? Because obviously, what you're implying is almost like a bit, is basically, in his case, it was a very simple form of retail arbitrage, except it was simpler than Amazon retail arbitrage. There's one form of product that we're advertising on our store as opposed to Amazon, and then we're literally going downstairs and picking it up. By the way, it reminds me, a friend of mine he was a musician, then he ran a used car sales business. And by the way, they're just as bad as you think they are. He told me all the tricks they do. It's not good. And then he started running a used French horn business. He literally did a bit of arbitrage. He literally went on a website of a famous French horn seller in the UK, talk about a niche. It's a bit like the Pixie Fair niche level. And then he would advertise on his own site the same instruments they had there. And when somebody bought it from him, he went to the other site and just literally bought the instrument from them and then sold it at a great premium. Now, he didn't have very happy customers after a while because he wasn't really adding value. I have to say that. A bit like the Zappos guys, a bit borderline, but on the other hand, it was a very primitive but successful test. So I've really seen that. I can't really talk too much about it because I don't think he wants to talk about it because a lot of unhappy people out there now because he's been too obvious about it. But what's your suggestion there? How do we implement this in real life? What's the first starting point?
Well, I think the first thing to start with is your goal. And that's the first chapter of the book, is goal setting. And you really have to decide sort of at the beginning what you are trying to achieve. And, in my view, I had this fuzzy goal that I wanted to make online income. I had heard that $1,000 a day number and was really mentally, psychologically motivated by it. That was to me sort of the escape hatch of the grind, the 9-to-5 grind. And I had a career in nonprofit management, and we still have a charity today. So I loved my career, but I was, of course, limited in so many ways. I think over time, what I realized was I like to be the boss. And so just having a boss, after 3 or 4 or 5 bosses that you feel are all bad bosses, you think to yourself, maybe it's not the boss, maybe I'm part of the issue. And so for me, the goal component of this was important to think through. What am I trying to achieve? And for me, it was financial freedom, but it was also employment, just decision-making freedom. And so in the first chapter of the book, I really ask people to stop and think about what their goals look like. Do you want, for example, a laptop lifestyle where you sit on a beach and sell stuff and you have no team, no facility, no other burdens other than just a laptop? Or do you want to have a professional company that looks like a corporate office and you've got employees and you need to show up on time and have the doors open and all those kinds of things? So those types of goals are important. And then the other goal that gets to kind of the gist of the conversation here is you want to start to narrow down who you're trying to serve and what customer opportunity exists, and it's really an exploration process. Some people know more fast or quickly than others who they want to serve and how, what might be an opportunity for them. And some people are completely clueless, and those are the ones that, and I was completely clueless. So that was my 10 years of, of problematic, figuring this out, was I didn't know who I could serve. And so that's the primary step. An initial activity is to just get clear on that. Now, some people, again, they're already into a craft or a hobby or a discipline or a niche in life. They like something so much that they'll say, "Oh, I'm going to find an opportunity in this certain area," and that's not a bad approach at all, because the sky's the limit in terms of opportunities to sell online and find new and interesting ways to serve people. It is not saturated. We're in day one, as Jeff Bezos likes to say, and it's an opportunity that's not going away anytime soon. And we really have an opportunity to sort out who we want to serve, and then figure out what they want, what they're urgently in need of, and begin to explore those product opportunities. Yeah.
So that really brings it to another question, which you've answered the question where to start. You start with your goal. And I guess then the question is whether e-commerce selling can be a vehicle for the goal. So rather than the relationship where I want to sell online, and online as a broad sort of answer back in the 90s was a channel and a way of marketing and a way of buying, I suppose. But that didn't really answer the question of what are you trying to achieve? It's a vehicle, but you don't know where you're trying to go. So I guess we've answered that. So don't put the cart before the horse. But having done that, let's flip that question on its head. If you want to achieve something financially, and it's 2021 as people are listening to this, coronavirus has caused massive displacements of workers in 2020 and mostly, and I guess probably will to really show up in the first half of 2021, particularly in the UK and US and abroad, in terms of unemployment figures, etc. So is e-commerce really an opportunity? It's a viable path now. Has all the growth in that industry happened already? I mean, you kind of answered that, but tell me more, convince me more, because I think it's a really critical point to answer.
Well, for probably the last 10 years, when I would read articles about e-commerce, in Forbes or, other magazines like that, Inc. or Fast Company or whatever, they would always cite a statistic that was roughly 10% of all retail transactions are e-commerce transactions. And, they would use that statistic. And I read those articles for a long, long time now. I mean, we're talking 20 years. And that statistic was basically stuck in. And what coronavirus has done, for all of the horror that it's, created around the world, and social disruption and health, obviously, impact, it's also radically modified people's behavior. And the migration towards online shopping has just been absolutely, in essence, required almost now at the household level. And I remember hearing the Shopify CIO say a couple months ago that they had seen in the volumes of Shopify sales their 2030 projected numbers occurring in 2020. So literally a decade of what they, where they thought they would be in 2030 in terms of volumes of online transactions had sped up because of COVID. And the opportunities are better than ever. I mean, imagine a scenario in which, I love to use this little metaphor for people. Hopefully it makes sense for people. And you may have heard this one before, but imagine a scenario in which in every small town there's one person who likes an obscure topic. And these are hard to say, but maybe it's ink pens, like old-fashioned, inkwell type pens, or maybe it's hummingbirds watching, or maybe who knows what it is. But those people have no local retail opportunity. There is actually a store that's for ink pens in New York, I saw. But locally, nobody would have access to that around the country, around the world. But then online, you aggregate all those people, and you've got a massive opportunity to serve them. And those niche opportunities, I like to call it a niche within a niche, and see even 2 or 3 levels deep. Those are the marketplaces and the communities of people who are not being served well. And so I really challenge people to think small and really focus on something that you're familiar with and that and you can see clearly that people aren't being served online well, and there's massive opportunity. I mean, I literally started 2 new coaching clients this week for our e-commerce coaching work, and both of them were in these spaces that were niche, subcategories, and had both scaled, one 6-figure business and one 7-figure business in just the last 2 years, 1 year, 2 years, and are selling very successfully. And so, to answer the question just with a word, yes, there's still huge opportunity to sell online. It is not saturated. The bigger the online buyer community gets, the more opportunity exists to serve them successfully. And it is a viable path to go forward in terms of your work life and career and efforts for employment or income. Yeah.
Very interesting. Just one quick reflection, because there's such a common question. The Amazon community is Amazon saturated. Well, there's a lot happening already. There's a lot of competition. But on the other hand, as an example of when a market gets bigger, I used to sell battery lights, like I've got lighting on desk here, battery operated lights that are operated by normal batteries you put in cells in the UK. And then if I niche down to rechargeable stand lights, which is a subset of the same thing. In the UK, I got to like number 1 for that keyword and was sold about 1 unit a day, which wasn't very viable given that I had to order about 500 at a time. In the US, it was about 10 a day. Because in the US, the market's so much bigger that you could support a tiny niche, which is not viable. So there's just certain tipping points that turn up, it turns out, because if you were in a really tiny market where any kind of battery powered light, like 5 years ago, 10 years ago, was a thing and was different, and you could add value by bringing it, then you could dominate that little niche. And I think that the problem comes when people dominate a niche, but not a niche within the niche isn't big enough. Then it can seem like, if you were in the UK when I was selling, you've hit the size of the bigger niche, but it's not big enough to support the smaller niche, right? So I would say that the bigger the tiny niches get, the more of them there are, the more opportunity there is actually.
Yeah, there's tons and tons of adjacent opportunities with these categories and these subcategories. And you start to realize that there is a really, really viable opportunity that exists that is maybe to a smaller target audience than you thought in the first place as you go down this path. And what you realize is there's wisdom in going super small.
Yeah.
If you can be the preeminent provider of an item that candidly the big companies would be like, that's too niche for us, that we would never go into that space because it's so small. But if you can establish yourself as the online leader, then you've got an opportunity. Imagine it like this. When the world of English people thought that England was the whole world, they fought over the big castles. But now, fast forward 200, 300, 400, 500 years, whatever it is, and you realize that there are beautiful little islands in the Caribbean or, Asia, that if you wanted to just go there and have a nice life, there's plenty of islands on this planet. And what you realize is the opportunity to find a small island that just doesn't have anything happening at all is an opportunity for you, metaphorically. And don't want to, sorry if that's too much of a reference to colonization or anything like that, and I'm trying to get political. I'm just trying to use it as a metaphor for opportunities and how opportunities abound. The larger something gets, the more and more you realize, oh, there's a lot of turf out here that literally no one's serving, no one's helping, no one's being a steward for this community, and it's an opportunity to step up and make a brand and make a viable e-commerce business. Yeah.
Excellent. So I guess we've answered the really big picture question that comes up for a lot of new sellers, and it is really critical to address because it is one of the barriers to getting started. I think people are kind of tempted and they're kind of fearful, and then they stay in that stuck state for 10 years, as you've articulated, and I did the same. Yeah. So tell us, coming back to the more concrete thing then, talk about that really nice, clear Zappos example, which I didn't know that detail. That's a really great story. How do we get started? What kinds of items could we get started with? Can you give some examples from your book or your coaching clients?
Oh, sure. Well, the book is filled with interviews. And so it's always fun to talk to people. And I love writing books because it's really sort of a hack I think I created with the first book, which was I didn't have enough content for my first book. And that was in 2011. And so I was like, man, what do I do? I'm supposed to have 50,000 words on this topic. Back then it was Pinterest. And so I thought, well, I'll just interview a bunch of successful Pinterest people and ask them what they're doing. And so I've done that now for all my books. I love doing that. It's a fun part of it. And I just reach out to people and ask them if I can interview them. I send them a Word doc with a dozen questions and get their answers, include it in the book. And it's really fun. So for this book, I really went broad and I tried to find people who have very interesting e-commerce businesses. One of the ones that most people will have heard of, but Mike was gracious to give me the interview, was Death Wish Coffee. He's just such a classic example of somebody who saw a niche opportunity, in his case in the coffee industry, which was his customers. He was a little coffee shop owner. His customers kept asking him for the strongest coffee he had in the morning time. They'd come at 5 a.m. or 5:30 and they'd just say, give me the strongest stuff you got. Well, and they didn't care anything about the brand or whatever it was. It was just about caffeine. And he stumbled over that answer enough times that he thought to himself, why don't I have a strongest coffee possible for these people? So he was, sufficiently, good at making blends and all that kind of stuff and sourcing coffee. And he made the strongest caffeinated blend he had ever seen. And he had it tested, milligrams of caffeine per ounce, against Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks and all the other big brands. And he called it Death Wish because he had a mug from Charles Bronson's old movie that was Death Wish was a movie. And he started serving it to his customers, and the rest is history. He's the #1 coffee brand on Amazon. He's just in all the Walmarts now all around the world. He's in our local grocery store here. He's just exploded with success by answering that one simple question. And that is in a massive consumer industry, coffee. But there are other people who I was fascinated by in the book as well. There's one that's a UK-based seller. And it's a fascinating story. And I'll just ask you the question. If you were asked to create a new product in the outdoor camping type world, like, do you think there's viable new products there? Or do you think that product market is pretty much saturated? Because I'll tell you that their story is pretty unique.
Yeah, well, if you're asking me that question, I guess that the answer is there's always some kind of niche that you can find. But I have looked in the camping niche quite a lot with my clients, and it is something I quite enjoy myself, or have done in the past. Nothing obvious springs to mind, because obviously the obvious things seem to have been played to me, I guess is the truth.
Yeah. So the company is called Tinsel. I'd encourage everyone to go check it out. And they made a unique tent that you suspend from trees. So it's kind of like a cross between a hammock and a tent. And the guy worked hard on it in the UK. And I'd love for you to go check out their story. We'll add it in the show notes, the URL. But it's just a fantastic example of a hammock and a tent. Who knew? But he worked hard on it. And in his case, he did make something novel and roll it out. And it's revolutionized the camping industry. And it's just a success across the board. People clamor for his stuff. And it's a fantastic opportunity for him online, of course, through multiple channels, but with his own brand. I first came across him on Instagram, and I was like, what is that? Because their Instagram work was so amazing. And so these are just a few examples, but my coaching clients that I work with on a weekly basis, just at the moment, I just tell you the industries they're in, the pet industry, crafting industry, jewelry industry, fashion industry, homeopathy, cleaning products, specialty foods, just go on and on. I mean, there are literally opportunities in just tons of categories. Yeah.
So what I really like about your Death Wish coffee example is it's a very clean example of how to do it, really, isn't it? Because first of all, he was in a particular area. Now, we can't all be working in an area that we're going to neatly expand out of our day job, but at least we could be like a keen coffee drinker. At least you'd be in there. If you're one of the guys that's in there 5:30 a.m. every day, you're still very involved with coffee, right? It's clearly very important to you. And what he was responding to is customer demand. People were literally asking for something he didn't have, which is just a huge, massive signal to anyone with an entrepreneurial instincts. You're like, wow, there's a gap between supply and demand. I mean, that's the classic, right? But also the fact that it had one single differentiator. It wasn't the best and the most subtle. It wasn't based on corporate kind of boardroom meetings and decision by committee, which ends up with something that survives the committee process always, as you know, from your corporate time, right? Ends up very bland. It was simply, let's not mess about. I need caffeine. Which I can totally relate to because I'm not a morning person. I love caffeine. So I would definitely be in the market for that. But so, I think that's, we talked about the Swiss coffee before, but that's a good nuance that you just mentioned there. This is by the way, I think you're now showing us the Tencel thing.
The Tencel tent company. And you can see by their site just the beauty and elegance of their product. And they have just a fantastic Shopify site and really, really engaging photography. And it was fun to do the interview. So anyway, all that to say, the book is filled with interviews from people who have figured out how to do it, and they explain step by step what they did, how they got past their hurdles, how they solved problems and scaled their business. And I think just for the interviews in the book alone, it's going to be well worth the read, and it'll be fun to hear people's reflections on some of these stories. These, everybody's heard, at least in the e-commerce space, everybody's heard of Death Wish Coffee at this point. Great story. But there are many other sellers that are fantastic online sellers that nobody's heard of as much. And I'd like to really feature them, and maybe we'll even do more than that and feature more people going forward.
I'd love to do that. I think everything about what you just said is great to me because it's case study based, as I think Tim Ferriss years ago in the 4-Hour Work Week, and he actually went to Harvard, I believe, didn't he? But he said that the Harvard Business School, is that right? Or was it Stanford? I lose track of the Ivy Leagues.
Well, he went to Princeton, but
sorry, my bad. I'm sure that's a massive, slap in the face for all the Harvard graduates out there listening. But so the point being that he mentioned Harvard Business School's sort of basic unit is the case study, and that's so great because any theory that is drawn out of real life has to be tested against real life, and I think that gives it a lot more power. So that gives a lot more credibility to all the stuff you put in the book. So look, we've talked about how to start, and basically you said your first step needs to be to define your goals. We talked about some examples of answering a real customer need, which is amazing. There's a core concept running through the book, which is also a theme in our podcast, which is about creating a brand, and again, a niche brand. So why did you focus on that as an e-commerce business model for your book?
Yeah, it's a great question. I list in the book about, I think, 17 e-commerce business models that are viable and people use them successfully. But the book in its kind of totality really speaks into this concept of creating your own unique brand and having ultimately a branded website and branded products. I do feel like that the opportunity to create a brand is one of the ways in which you create a powerful online moat. And of course, Warren Buffett pioneered that thinking and phrase, having a castle with an unbreachable moat. A brand is one of those moats. And the opportunity to bond with people and have them support your work and rally around you as a seller through your brand is central to the idea of long-term success. Now, Amazon sellers in the last 10 years have really been creative with their quick and dirty, product private label strategies that really are sort of a what you might call a zombie brand that they don't really have any emotive power. And if you're not familiar with what I'm talking about, it's just basically selling something with a label on it on Amazon. That's not what I'm talking about in this book. What I talk about in this book is really the opportunity to create a deeply meaningful brand to your core customers. A brand that really speaks into their situation and that they can identify with and bond with you over. And you're the then captain of that little ship. And the opportunity to do that is there's multiple reasons why that's a long-term good plan. And And so I just encourage people in the book to think through that. And we walk through step by step how to go after creating that kind of brand and serving people through it for the long term. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's so interesting what you were saying, because coming from the private label world and Amazon, um, two things. Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. Amazon sellers have been good at quick and dirty. Let's not use the word strategy. Let's use the word tactic, because of
Sure.
what it is, right?
Yeah.
It's a quick responsiveness, opportunism,
Yeah.
and there's nothing wrong with opportunism, except it's exhausting and it doesn't tend to last. So
Yeah.
I'm not condemning anyone for it. I feel sorry for you, because I just think there are still people that try to act that way on Amazon, and you
Mhm.
can act that way on Amazon, but you have to be really quick.
Yeah.
It's basically competition focused, as opposed to what Amazon is, which is customer obsessed. And
Yeah.
if you're competition focused, it's a bit like stock day trading. It's really hard to get it right, and it's pretty exhausting, which is
Mhm.
why for most retail investors, they suggest you don't do that. You buy and hold, do the Warren Buffett thing of finding, like Coca-Cola or something, which has got a very good moat around it. In that case, intellectual property and brand based,
Yeah.
Apple, Amazon, whatever. Invest for the long term and then don't mess with it. And that's kind of a bit like that sort of thinking behind creating a real brand, which is it's not going to be exciting from day one. It may cost you money rather than make you money, but it's got some kind of future life to it. So the
Yeah.
first thing I want to say is that it's interesting. We had a conversation last recording a few episodes ago about this for private labeling, and I'm basically saying, yeah, don't private label. Don't
Mm.
do that thing anymore on Amazon, because I don't think it works on Amazon. And interestingly, I had a similar conversation with Rick Cesari, who's a kind of branding guru from the QVC days. I mean, guru is an overused word, but he really is a bit of a god, given that he was behind several $billion sales of products. Sales, not even market cap. I mean, it's
Yeah.
pretty serious. And Jason Boyce, who's a very serious Amazon seller, 17-year veteran. And they were both saying the similar sorts of things to you, which you've got to build a brand. So it's interesting that
Yeah.
the Shopify long-term thinking and the Amazon short-term thinking have ended up going towards the long-term thinking you've always been espousing. I think there's a shift in that direction, which I think is one of the results of what we mentioned earlier, the higher competition, meaning that you have more opportunity than ever. But if
Yeah.
your tactics are superficial, then you're going to get lost quicker than ever, I think.
Yeah.
And what are your
Absolutely.
thoughts about that?
No, I totally agree. And people can try a lot of different business models, and the beauty of online selling is the business model you start with doesn't have to be the business model you end with. And that was certainly our case for my wife and I explained this in the book. After 10 years of dreaming and wishing I had an online business, we basically just threw our hands up and said, well, we can't come up with anything unique. Why don't we just sell this stuff that people keep asking us about, which was, in our case, my wife's doll-sized clothes that she would make for the American Girl dolls. And there are many, many people who do that on Etsy. Is a huge marketplace for that. And nowadays there are anyway. Back then it was just eBay as an available platform. And so we started by marketing her handmade doll clothes garments. And that got us in the game. It got us on the platform. It allowed us to learn what eBay auctions are all about, how it works, how to optimize them, and really what exists in terms of niches and sub niches and who's out there. And we did that for 18 months. And then we pivoted to digitally downloaded sewing patterns. And that was in 2009. September 2009 is when we pivoted. And that really has been the track we've run in now for a long, long time on Pixie Fair. You can go check out our website, and have had literally millions and millions of transactions through our store, and have made our livelihood off of that now for years and years and years. And so that's the beauty of e-commerce, is you can learn a model, master it, and then you see the shortfall or shortcomings with it. And then it allows you to go from there. And I mention this principle frequently because it's so central to this idea, and it's called the corridor principle. Robert Ronstadt, professor of business, came up with this concept where we go down a hallway in business, and you've got doors that you open or you see open to you as you walk on the path that you would never have seen if you just stood at the beginning and thought to yourself, oh, well, I wonder how I could do this. And the corridor principle is so powerful as a metaphor because it's about active walking forward with a strategic plan that maybe is suboptimal. But if you're in the game, you can see new opportunities and better business models. And those are ones that might ultimately change your life. Now, you might get it right out of the gate, first try, first at bat. You might hit a home run, to use the American baseball terms, but that's rare. Most people get in the game and then figure things out, and that's completely normal and really a huge opportunity for people, you know.
Yeah, I think there's another phrase that comes to mind, a good old American cliche, which is you can't steer a parked car.
Yeah.
There is something about being in momentum.
Yeah.
And for me, example, before the days of sat nav, my way of getting somewhere was I would decide where to go. I would look at the map. I would drive in the wrong direction to start with because I have zero sense of direction, which makes my wife laugh because she has incredibly sense of direction. And then I would, turn around, literally. I would head what I thought was the right way. I'd turn left. I'd go up the road for a bit. I thought I'd look at the map again, realize it was wrong, and I'd turn right. I was very grateful for the invention of sat nav, trust me. But the point is, I got somewhere. But if I just started at home, if I was going to be that rubbish at navigating, which I was, and am, but I use Google Maps on my phone and I'm fine. Then I would never have got anywhere because I had to make those first 2, 3, 4 mistakes before I got somewhere. It's kind of pathetic, but it was reality. So talking of being authentic. So I really, really like that reality check. Now, related to that then, I don't know how these two relate. You say your chapter 6 talks about scaling up beyond one product. So we talked about, getting started. But in my experience, that's a really hard inflection point. So why do you think that's hard? And how does that relate to the corridor principle we've been talking about, that scaling thing?
Yeah, it is hard. And I think the focus on the customer and what the customer wants is the way in which you find your next set of, products. In our case, on Pixie Fair, we've got about 3,000 SKUs, 3,000 products. And once we figured out the niche we were in, it became obvious. And I think the answer to the question, what's the next logical product, it is along those lines. Who are you serving and what do they need? Now, if you just do research on Amazon and look for gaps in the markets or competitive opportunity, you'll frequently say to yourself, wow, there's nothing there. I can't do that. I can't launch a second product. Somebody's already got the idea. That is a competitive, product-focused, Amazon-focused way of looking at it. If you step back and say, who am I serving? And where are they online? And frequently people start on Amazon these days, but you certainly can find opportunity on Amazon. But I do encourage people to look into Shopify and their own brand, because as soon as you make that connection, that beyond Amazon connection to a tribe, then it's really about your relationship with them. And when we started really focusing on this in September 2009, we had, I remember, 125 people on our email list. And with 125 people on your email list, you can't launch products very well, at least not at scale. But fast forward today, and I think our total MailChimp account is 230,000 addresses. And we, in different lists, have a lot of people that we can put our products in front of to launch a new product. And that's the way to look at this, is who am I serving? How can I bond with them? How can I use a brand and my own Shopify site ultimately to connect with them and then to launch products to them? And when you do that, when you build your own direct to consumer opportunity for your product, the question of what other products you can launch really pivots differently than if you had just done a statistical look at data from Amazon.
That's a great lesson for any Amazon sellers listening on. I guess it comes back to the thing that I've been talking about for at least 2 or 3 years with my clients who are Amazon focused, for sure, as am I. But it's the person in the pain question, right? So who are you serving? What's their need? And focusing on Amazon is a great way to focus on the competition, as you've said. And that's a great way to get depressed and to miss the point, because what you're saying is what's already there. By definition, that doesn't really show you where the gap between supply and demand is. It shows you the supply, but it doesn't show you where the unmet demand is. And I think you're absolutely right. And also, I think what you're saying is that you're now in a wonderful position where you don't need to refer to marketplaces to figure out what to sell next. You refer to your own tribe of people, and that there's an internal reference point that you can develop over time. And that's really powerful.
And I really learned that through the School of Hard Knocks, because when we started in 2009, I literally had no platform online with which to sell our product, which was a digitally downloadable PDF document. Etsy didn't exist back then for digital goods, and Amazon wouldn't allow it, and eBay didn't allow it. They still don't. I still don't sell our core product on Amazon. So if you're just doing an Amazon-based centric search of what's out there, what do people need, you just never see our category. So we're not there. They don't allow it. And there are many such examples in the world that you just have to realize the opportunity is huge beyond Amazon. But a lot of people will use it to start, again, this corridor principle. Maybe they'll do retail arbitrage or online arbitrage, and then they'll grow beyond those. And it's really exciting to see it come together for people. And it's a passion of mine. The coaching work we do, I love it. I love seeing people go from, sort of this, I'm not sure what's happening, this is maybe working, to really building an e-commerce company that is transformational and really will impact their life forever.
It's fun. That's very cool. Yeah. I mean, and you are a lovely coach as well. You got a nice sense of humor and a lot of patience. I mean, while I was working with you, it's normally Mike's 15 minutes at the start of the hour. I just get what was on my brain off my chest, and then you would start gently steering me towards what actually served me. So I can certainly attest to your coaching skills and mindset. Some people coach because they're not sure what else to do. You seem to have a real passion for it. So sure. I could definitely attest to that. Now, you've really organically brought up what I was going to ask about anyway, which is your 9th chapter, which is interesting that it's that far down the list, right? Of whatever it is, 12 chapters, is entitled simply Decide Where to Sell. But that's not an easy decision. Now, you've talked about platforms already. How do we make that decision, at least initially?
Yeah. Well, Amazon has made it so easy to, reach a massive audience. It is the first stop for many people who are learning about e-commerce and want to learn to, to sell online. It's certainly a viable marketplace for many, many, many products, and is a huge opportunity. And people who start there are Amazon centric. That's the only downside, is their brain is wired, with Amazon as the algorithm. But that's okay. Beyond that, there are many platforms now, and as I mentioned at the top of this show, the marketplace revolution is really just transforming our opportunities as e-commerce sellers. And so the phrasing that people use are omni-channel opportunities. And omni-channel meaning multiple channels that you can sell on, and being on multiple channels. We have clients now that are scaling on Walmart.com faster than they're scaling on Amazon. One client comes to mind who is pretty sure Amazon is going to become Walmart.com is going to become his number one sales channel, and he is not a small seller. And so there are opportunities now in many, many ways that there just weren't 10 years ago. And the app revolution, of course, with things like Mercari, Poshmark, OfferUp, on and on, is just a whole different level as well for local selling. So there are just so many paths now to go on. It's sort of fielder's choice. I would suggest a path forward for people, and that is, if you're just starting out and you're trying to serve a community, I would try to sell a certain number. Make it a goal to try to sell a certain number on a marketplace. Maybe it's $10,000 worth of goods, or maybe it's $1,000. Maybe it's a certain number of units. The opportunity to sell on a marketplace to people really will help you understand what exists in the marketplaces, what's out there. And I think it is a good first step. And then beyond that, working on the branding and launching a Shopify site is really a logical second step. And so that's sort of sequentially what I encourage people to do if they're just starting out, is, hey, go look at how you can sell on Amazon or eBay, and learn that, do that for 6 months or whatever it is. And that's your boot camp. And then go from there. Yeah.
Great advice. I think what you say is there are two thoughts that I want to bring out. One is the where you start to sell can be just basically for learning. So going with that mindset rather than I want to scale to millions of dollars a year, which on Amazon, you can scale sales alarmingly easily and just completely fool yourself if you're used to an employee mindset where money coming to you is what you get to keep.
Yeah.
Where it's not like that on Amazon, and they won't make it easy to see the nonnies. I do a little bit of management for a guy this morning, and I sent him my invoice from work today, and he immediately came back and said, I really need some help figuring out the profit and loss because I can't work it out. And I said, unfortunately, that's a job for a bookkeeper. So Amazon does not make that easy.
Right.
So be aware of that. But also the other thing I want to point out is it doesn't have to be Amazon, because I, weirdly enough, having put myself out there as an Amazon specialist, like all the stuff behind me branding me as Amazon. Did I mention Amazon? I had a Belgian guy come to me. He's been following the podcast for ages, and he doesn't sell a penny on Amazon, but he sells on bol.com, which is the Dutch equivalent of Amazon. And he's selling stuff which made me kind of wince when I first said what he was selling, because if you saw that on Amazon, even in 2014, Amazon.com, it would have been hyper competitive stuff in the sort of electronics accessories niche. And he's making an absolute killing, really good profit margin, because he shared his numbers with me on Bol. So it doesn't have to be Amazon. You've mentioned Walmart. There are many localized, especially if you're in Europe or somewhere like this, quite a lot of localized and language specific things where sometimes Amazon does a pretty horrible job of localization. The most famous example of that is when they launched in Sweden. They put up a flag, I believe, for Argentina or something. It was just a total PR disaster. So Amazon is not always the best option for launching a marketplace. If you happen to be in a language minority or a product category, I really would encourage you to think outside that. But I think also the other thing to reflect on is that I see in the 10K Collective, who you've met, that the guys there generally doing between about $500,000 and several $1 million a year in revenue. Most of them are coming to the point, probably rather belatedly, where they really are very keen. Almost all of them are setting up Shopify, WooCommerce, Magento sites of their own because they realize they want to protect their brand, which is slightly different. I see no reason why you should have to wait that long. And I think that your advice is much sounder, to start that brand building earlier and to really, go full on into owning your brand earlier. I think it makes a lot more sense. It's safer. And you know what? The other thing is, it's mentally better. There are so many upset and angry Amazon sellers out there, right? Really big ones. Which is not a great relationship to your business, right?
No, it's totally true. But Amazon is sort of a victim of its own success. I saw somebody post, who's an Amazon seller, on his Facebook the other day. He just posted a question: "Are you still excitedly selling on Amazon?" And the flood of people's responses, which were, "No way, I quit, I'm done, I hate them, love-hate relationship, I'm leaving them," super negative sentiment. And that's unfortunate and sad, because you kind of feel for the guys at Amazon. On the one hand, they've made many people's lives transformed, and e-commerce is a business and opportunity, and yet frustrations sort of linger through their system because they have so many sellers. They have to have so much policy and process, and with any system, as soon as you get a lot of people trying to win in the system, they try to game the system, and then you end up with bad actors who really spoil the soup for everyone. And so Amazon sort of has that problem, and it's unfortunate, but it is an amazing opportunity, and I wouldn't want to discourage people from learning to sell on Amazon at all. I think
Funnily enough,
people,
here's the Amazon guys' take on this. I would almost say the opposite, which is weird, because Jason Boyce, who's like ultra Amazon guy, was selling back in 2003 with his brothers. So not only is he was involved with his brother's like family as well as business, right? They're all in. And his take on it is really very simple, which is, number one, if you're not on Amazon, you're not on the internet. Now, I'm not sure I agree with that, but there is something in that. It is a big percentage of e-commerce. I mean, we can argue against that because of what we've just said, but still I can take his point. And the other one is Amazon is not your friend. They are shark-like, and you're being very nice. Yes, it's true that they put a lot of policies into place to avoid abuse by particularly the Chinese big factories and other bad actors. But also they are in themselves, they are getting taken to court by the European Union and the United States for a reason. They tend to private label everything you create. They tend to try and bypass you. They are, in fact, pretty shark-like in their behavior. So what I would say is, I wouldn't say that means you don't start on Amazon. It means going with your eyes open, but have the plan to build your own brand, exactly like you're saying, earlier than you would have thought of before, because now we know how it works, and it isn't pretty, to be honest.
Sorry to interrupt, but it's like you're in a gladiator ring, and one of the gladiators also owns a stadium and is the Caesar.
Exactly right. You put it precisely right. And which means that if you're going to do that, and ironically enough, Jason Boyce's response is, you know what, the only response is to build a really strong brand.
Yes.
And actually, so it kind of points weirdly in the same direction, even though traditionally there's this, Amazon's great because you can make crazy sales. Oh no, Shopify is great because you earn. There's a traditional divide there that really is disappearing now. I think the Amazon sellers are sprinting to getting their own Shopify site whilst appreciating the millions of dollars in cash flow that they get from Amazon when it works. So you can do both, and I think you should do both. I really think that's what I suppose I'm coming down to there.
Absolutely right. Totally agree. Yep.
So coming back to brand, then just a couple more questions about your book. There's chapter 4 title is really intriguing, Sandy. You advise sellers to create engaging brand rituals. What does that mean?
Oh, engaging brand rituals. Yeah. So after you have a brand, you need to have it have emotive power, meaning. I mean, it has to be evocative. It's got to engage with people in a way that it really attracts them for the long term. And brand rituals is just one of the ways you can do that. So what is a brand ritual? Here's an example from our business, Pixie Fair. And anybody can go see this. We'll add a link in the show notes. And we've talked about this previously on a podcast, which we did a deep dive on. Every year, Christmas time, we do something on Pixie Fair called the 12 Days of Christmas. It's a series of 12 one-day contests. And we run it as blog comment contests, and it's one of our brand rituals. And so every year, our customers know that we're going to do 12 Days of Christmas, and it's fun prizes and giveaways. Now, here's the super interesting part, which I document in this prior conversation we've had. But the comment question entry method we use strategically, and here's what we do. We have 12 questions that are all, in essence, what you might call customer analysis or data mining type questions. Like, how did you hear about Pixie Fair? If we could offer one thing that we don't currently, what would it be that would really delight your life? Like the questions that when people answer, we will learn about our customers. And the results are crazy for our 12 days contests. We get, I think in the deep dive I did analysis, it was 24,000 blog comments in 12 days. And last year, I didn't do the math for last year's, but it's similar. So, we'll get between 700 and 3,000 comments per day on our 12 Days of Christmas comment contest. Our customers love it. And it's really, really beneficial for us to learn all this information. And so you get the idea that it's a brand ritual that is a win-win. So that's one example. And there are many such examples that thoughtful brand owners can create in their business where they do things that are unique, interesting, and that customers will love, and that really set them apart from the competition. And I mean, if there's one chapter in this book that I think is probably related to branding that most people haven't thought through, that I really try to walk through in detail, it is that one. And it's not hard stuff to do. It's just most e-commerce sellers stumble into e-commerce and they don't have a broader background in direct response marketing or consumer engagement strategies. And so I try to lean into prior career and prior learnings and those kinds of things to really bring out these ideas so that e-commerce sellers coming up can be like, oh my gosh, I just learned a whole set of hacks that are totally going to set me apart. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think it's that I've talked in the and this isn't my phrase, but zig when they zag is one of the phrases that goes around. I guess Tony Robbins has used it under Chapeau and the email marketing goddess, where I heard it from most recently. But I think often people take that to mean use the most crazy ninja tactics. It's a bit like your opponent's using kung fu, and I'm going to have to learn Magka Grav or whatever that Israeli special forces thing is.
The Israeli martial arts, yes.
Whatever it is. Guys, hang on a second. You don't need to become some genius. You just need to do the common sense things that is not common. And what you offer is a lot of business common sense. As one of the mastermind members who's doubling his business and heading for millions in this next year said, he seems to have his feet on the ground and his head screwed on. So in other words, that business common sense you offer in the e-commerce space is not that common. And I think what you just said, it sounds incredibly doable when you say like, oh, I can imagine doing that. Why not a comment contest? I'm sure there are many nuances, but in essence, it feels doable and a lot less intimidating than trying to hack the Amazon algorithm. But here's the one thing I would say is that the mentality difference, we talked about the danger of being on Amazon is you get sucked into Amazon's way of thinking about things, and it's true. And I think nothing wrong with using Amazon for yourself. Don't let Amazon use you. This is the key. Apart from going with your mind open, with your eyes open to the danger of Amazon on their own platform, as you said, you go into the ring with the guy who owns the boxing ring. This is the thing. Amazon teaches you to obsess with sales and to get the adrenaline rush of you put money into the system now and you get money back out, or at least it looks like it's coming back out. Whereas what you're talking about is something where I'm very excited because I know the future value of customer insight from running really more the podcast than my own e-commerce site. But that customer insight excites me because I know that means you can produce future products that are perfect for them. You can then create marketing assets like sales pages and email sequences that are perfect for them. And I know that that's going to produce crazy amounts of income in the future. But that different mentality is also something I think we've got to be aware of, right? I'm really conscious of that with the Amazon sellers. I know that they can just get, they get addicted to that cash flow flowing past them, and that they just neglect that future of their business, their branding. What are your thoughts on that one?
Well, it's a challenge. I mean, this is the way I look at it. Amazon is a vehicle that you operate, to your point, and you should not be the vehicle they operate. They're a vehicle you operate to make an outcome happen. But all vehicles are different. A snowmobile or a snow machine is very, very different than a helicopter. And every e-commerce channel and business model that you can do in e-commerce space is just a different vehicle. And every vehicle has pros and cons. Some only go 10 miles an hour. Some fly. Some go underwater. You have to realize that there's business model attributes that you learn to deal with, and no business model is perfect. Every business model has some wrinkle or weird oddity that's a frustration to you. But if you work at this over time, you'll find business models that really do have fantastic upside and are manageable and doable and relatively simple to run. It doesn't take a degree in rocket science or brain surgery. And so I think that's the way to look at it is, if you're going to learn to do, for example, online arbitrage on Amazon, you're operating a vehicle that has a certain set of features and benefits and downsides. And you stick your hand in the flywheel and your fingers are going to get bloody. And that's just the way to look at this and take the sort of, I guess, the trade skill approach where you say, look, I'm going to learn how, sorry to mix all my metaphors, but I'm going to learn how to use the hammer today. And next week, I'm going to learn how to use the chop saw. And after that, I'm going to learn how to use the drill, et cetera, et cetera. And you use these tools effectively to build your long-term e-commerce breakthrough and your long-term business that is going to impact your life, change your world, and really help you to get where you want to go financially and with your long-term career. And that's just the way I look at it,
Nice. I like your mixed metaphors, and whichever take you pick, the tools or the vehicles. I think you're right. I think what's interesting is a lot of people, because I've been trying to educate myself, because I can see what's going on with Brexit, that there's a level of denial at the business community in the UK that business, I think, we'll see what will have happened in January by the time of recording in mid-December, that the government, for various reasons, the government in this country and the EU will probably politically have to not agree, and the pound is going to plummet. And I'm trying to figure out how to make use of that, because I'm going to be forced to pay double for my groceries next year. I might have some upside. And the truth is, of course, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm looking at, contracts for difference and spread betting and thinking, wow, this looks really scary. And I'm right to be wary, because these are complex, sophisticated vehicles. I need to be very careful what I'm doing. And I think people often approach Amazon because people have been sold into the idea it's easy and quick, that they approach it like it's some kind of bicycle that goes a maximum 10 miles an hour with one gear, like a sort of old Vickers bike in the countryside. And actually, it's a motorway with people thundering along at 70 miles an hour. You need to be very aware of the environment you're going into. So I would say, again, without being anti-Amazon, it is a complex, sophisticated vehicle. It's a little bit like entering the stock market or forex trading. or whatever, that kind of situation, you actually need to be pretty educated before you go in.
Sure.
Whereas when you're building your own brand, there's a lot that there may be crickets, there may be nothing happening, but at least you're going to be forgiven for
Yes.
gradually putting up an ugly as hell site, and then a somewhat ugly site, and then it has lots of flaws, but there's only 10 people using it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you can take your time a bit more. And I think it's very important to be aware of the nature of the beast that you're dealing with Amazon. It is not a friendly local kind of shop.
Yeah.
It's a seething motorway in the middle of a busy city. You know, it's New York City at rush hour time.
Yeah, point taken. And I guess just to add on to that a little bit, that's why Shopify was such a revolution. You know, I sold for over 5 years on WordPress with various shopping carts plugged in, and I did all the things you could do to make that version of online selling workable, and it was just a disaster. And when we found out about Shopify and migrated to it, because it allowed digitally downloaded products mainly, at least you could do it through the Shopify site process, we became the biggest fanboys, my wife and I, fangirl for Shopify. And, you know, they've featured us in our articles, and we, you know, my Udemy course, I think has 30,000 students in it now, Shopify Power. And the reason is because they set up the system to really, really work effectively for the entry-level e-commerce seller, and solved all the problems and just made it simple, and created a beautiful version 1 site for many, many people. And it gets you in the game so much faster than older solutions that you had to rig together and, you know, kind of piece together solution sets. So I'm a huge fan of Shopify for your branded website. I do think it's better than the competition, and but it does help tremendously. And so, you know, this is one of the steps in your journey, is how do you get yourself in direct consumer relationships with your customers. Shopify is the answer for that. And yeah, these pieces come together. And I think, to your point, this is not an overnight get rich quick thing. And that's the way it's sold, like, you know, by a lot of people who want to sell the courses. But if that's your first exposure to it, it's wrong. And you just have to realize, you just have to say to yourself, I'm going to approach this like learning to be an electrician, or I'm going to approach this like learning to be a dentist, or whatever it is. I'm just going to learn this until I'm really competent. And if you approach it like a trade that you're going to get into, then you'll be great. It'll happen faster than you expected, and you'll go further than you expected, and you'll have a bigger outcome than you expected. It is a huge opportunity for people to have a real breakthrough.
I really love that message. I mean, I'm the guy that whilst I sell a course, I haven't made many sales because I can't bring myself to lie about the fact that it's going to be hard work. And I end up with people that, you know, it's such a nightmare trying to deal with somebody whose mentality, who otherwise, right, talking about trade skills, I worked with a guy the other day, just talking this through with him about a potential client, who I don't think is going to become a client, because he makes £120,000 a year or something, like $150,000 as a tradesman, literally, you know, installing stuff in houses, works very, very hard, and wants to create a side hustle which will eventually replace his day job. He'd been sold on the idea that he could, within 1 year of Amazon selling, private labeling, replace that income, which implies like whatever you leave in the business is left to your profits. You can't leave nothing. So maybe half of that's profit. The amount of Amazon revenue you were implying by that was just crazy, and it's just complete rubbish. So I can't say strongly enough how right that is. But also, to flip it on its head, what a wonderful message! Like, it's a set of trade skills. Learn the skills properly. Just like a good, you know, plumber, you can fix the pipe. So there's no mystery. It's just experience and passing on, you know, experience from other people, and understanding the laws of, you know, physics in that case, and the laws of the market and so forth. So I really like that. It's a very kind of nuanced, uplifting idea. It's like, it's absolutely possible. You just got to do the work. And I really like that message very much indeed.
Yeah, totally agree, 100%. And the beauty there is, you know, if you've got the will to do it, the how and that kind of stuff, it'll come together. You know, I think it's Tony Robbins who says, you know, if you have a big enough why, The how doesn't matter. The how will come together. The opportunity to learn this stuff is real, and that's important. And the thing about it is, if let's just say 10,000 people start selling online today, there will be somebody who makes $150,000 in a year net, and there will be somebody who makes way more than that. But the question is, what's the average person do on year 2? Now, here's the thing, and you might say to yourself, well, I'm average, so it's going to stink. Here's the thing. If 90% of those people drop out after year 2, the cohort you're competing with is radically smaller. Now, the newbies will be coming up, but you'll know a lot more than the newbies. And if you're still in the game in year 3, then you'll be competing against new newbies, and the 10% that remain from the year 2. You get the idea that you're going to just have like a marathon. You're going to be running for a long time. And if people start 2, 3, 4 years behind you, yeah, maybe they'll have overnight success, and maybe you'll feel like you're running real slow. But if you just keep going forward and learning the trade skill, you're going to end up with a workable e-commerce business over time, and it'll change your life. It really will be a breakthrough. And I mean, that's sort of the gist of this whole book, E-commerce Power, and the gist of our conversation today is there is huge opportunity here for people who are willing to approach it with a journey person's work ethic and go after these ideas faithfully. And I guess that's the main sentiment of the book that I'm trying to get across.
I have to say, somebody's run half marathons, although not marathon yet. The fact that you choose a marathon, not a sprint, is another really great metaphor, I think, because you pointed out, I mean, the field thins out so quickly. By the way, the 90% idea, I mean, when it comes to Amazon selling, my understanding of the best statistics I can understand that I think 98% of people who start selling on Amazon don't sell anything after the first year, or never even sell anything. So it's really a tiny percentage of a percentage you'll be competing with on Amazon directly in year 3. Now, those people that are left are still mighty competition, but it's nothing like as many as you might imagine. So that's a great reminder that actually, if you stick in the game, sheer attrition gets rid of most of your competition, doesn't it? Sure. It's just sticking with it. Okay, well, look, this is clearly a great book. Like a lot of your thinking, it's very deeply thought through, comes from a lot of not just your ideas and your understanding from real experience, but a lot of other people's that you've interviewed, which is super powerful. So how do people get hold of the book? And have you got any bonuses or goodies that you're offering for this as well?
Sure. So as we record this live, the book, for those that are watching live, you should know the book comes out and is available on January 5th. It is available on pre-order right now on Amazon. So you can certainly go get a pre-order copy. If you're listening to this after January 5th, then you can go to ecommercepowerbook.com, and we're going to have some special offers. In fact, the free book just covers shipping model, free plus shipping model, I think is the one we're going to launch with. And we're going to have other training opportunities, and I think we're going to even gamify it, this book launch. We're going to run like a challenge and really have some fun. We'll have prizes and that kind of thing. So look to ecommercepowerbook.com and see what we've got there for you. And we're going to make it really fun and give away some additional goodies beyond just the book and that kind of thing. So we're excited about the opportunity to spread the word and really work with people who are have the same mindset as we do, which is approaching this like a long-term opportunity, not get rich quick, but really want to dig in deep and learn good lessons. And we're excited to see what happens with the people who get the book. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, this feels like such a healthy book to have out there. On the one hand, there is a lot of opportunity, and on the other hand, to grab it, you need to, well, not so much grab it as work towards it. As the journeyman, as you said, which is a very nice medieval kind of tradition, that you learned from apprentice, journeyman, and master, and that you can't leap to master in one go. It's a bit like that composition teacher of mine, stop trying to create a masterpiece and just, work towards being the journeyman. A nice humble goal there. I like it. So, Jason, fantastic stuff. Thank you so much for letting us know about your book. And for anyone listening to the podcast, please do let us know. You let us feel the love by either giving us a rating if you're at Apple Podcasts, so 5 stars or 4 stars, whatever you think we have earned. You don't even have to write a review. And if you're on any of the other podcast platforms, then don't forget to subscribe as well. You get more of this good stuff delivered directly to your podcast inbox.
All right, let's call it good. Thanks everybody for watching live with us. That was our podcast. Hey, that was an hour and 18 minutes. Holy
That was
smokes.
quite a lot.
That
Yeah,
was
sorry, it's
quite a
probably me
conversation.
talking too much,
That's
but
good
it's
stuff.
look, it's a whole book summarizing your last,
We'll chop
10
it up.
years, over a decade's work. I mean, so I guess it's worth deep diving into. And anyway, you know what? I think this is a podcast between two guys. You're not, being kicked off the interview after somebody who's creating stuff for ADHD people listening for 20 minutes,
Yeah.
People can choose to listen or not, but I think, this is a deep dive podcast. So I don't
Absolutely.
apologize for deep diving.
Well, thank you everybody who watched us live. If you're watching via replay, we really appreciate it. Feel free to add questions or comments underneath the video wherever you're watching it, YouTube or Facebook or in the groups or whatever. And we'll be sure to check back and answer questions. So I'm going to end it there. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us, and really appreciate your support for the book and for the podcast as well.